You've been around for a good long while. For people who have not or maybe heard about you, can you give us a little background on yourself?
So people know me as the guy that wrote the world's best-selling book on internet advertising, which is the Google AdWords book, Ultimate Guide to Google Ads. Also wrote Ultimate Guide to Facebook Advertising, which is the best-selling book on Facebook ads. And 80/20 sales and marketing has kind of become a Bible of marketing, the numbers of marketing. And so I believe the reason that you had me come here today is that most real estate investors, they think they're just gonna like buy an apartment complex and then the checks are gonna show up and then they find out they have to make people come and live in the apartment complex. Or if they flip the house, they got to get somebody to buy the house. And guess what? That's marketing. So I've got tons of friends who are real estate investors. And well, in fact, when I got when I moved to Chicago, now I would not call myself a real estate investor, but when I moved to Chicago, we bought a brick bungalow with an in-law apartment in the basement, and the $150 rent from the in-law apartment was the only way that we were going to make our mortgage payment. And so, yeah, like real estate is a good thing.
We love real estate. And yes, we do think we're in the real estate investing business. And in fact, like you said, we're all in marketing and sales. If anybody has kids, we're marketing and selling every single day. Now, you wrote that book, 80/20 Rule, and it was fascinating. Can you explain to me, explain to us to hear what the principle is behind 80/20 and why we should care?
Well, 80/20 comes from real estate. So Vilfredo Pareto was an Italian economist 100 years ago, and he was looking at all these different countries, and he figured out that 20% of the people own 80% of the real estate, and 20% of the people own 80% of the wealth, and the other 80% of the people only own 20% of the real estate, and the other 80% only own 20% of the wealth. And it was true in every country. And it didn't even really seem to matter what kind of government they have, or what kind of economic system they have, or what kind of policies they have. And so we call this the 80/20 rule. Well, I had heard somewhere, I'd heard that, and I had heard that 80% of your purchase orders and your sales come from 20% of your customers, and vice versa, that the other 20% come from the other 80% only come. And okay, so I thought, well, is that true? And I did a QuickBooks report, and I'm like, I'll be darned. All the orders that came into our company, 80% of the orders came from 20% of the customers. And I didn't really do anything about it. I didn't really get it. But fast forward a couple of years, I read a book by Richard Koch, and he made this comment about 80/20 has a whole lot to do with chaos theory. Well, the first thing, I mean, there's no dissertation here, but chaos theory is like, well, why do cracks go through your windshield the way that they do? And why is the butterfly effect, like, why is it true that you could wave your raincoat in the air and possibly start a hurricane somewhere 6 months from now? It's because of patterns inside of patterns inside of patterns. And when he said that, I was like, wait a minute, is there an 80/20 inside it every 80/20? Because wait a second, if that's true, my whole idea of the world just suddenly shattered and went out the window. And I started looking like, I'll be darned, that's right, which actually means this is like one of the most important things I ever learned. Like, how come I didn't learn it till now? Like, how come it took me like 30 years to find this out?
Yeah, it's like reading Rich Dad Poor Dad for the first time and learning about passive income. You're like, what? Where has this been all my life? But now your angle to this 80/20 rule, which applies in many parts of the you took a sales and marketing angle to it, and you took it in a way to help companies scale.
Yeah.
Why is that relevant to anyone who wants to scale? And so we're in the syndication business. We want to scale our business. Why should we care? Why is that important?
Okay, so if it's true that 80% of your income comes from 20% of your properties, and 80% of your rent checks come from 20% of the renters, And 80% of the gains in the stock market come from 20% of the stocks, which is all true. Okay, there's another step, which is 80% of the 80% comes from 20% of the 20%. And 80% of the 80% of the 80% comes from 20 of the 20 of the 20. And it keeps going. Okay, so that means 1% of your properties produce 50% of your income. 1% of your investments produce 50% of your profits. 1% of your customers make 50% of the purchases. And so what that means is that all of our businesses are complex, and there's all this stuff, and there's all these spreadsheets, and there are all these forms and letters and deals and contracts and whatever. But the fact is that 1% of it produces half of everything. And that means it's worth at least half your attention. So your attention should be hugely disproportional. It means several other things. It means there's a whole bunch of stuff in any business. I mean, I'm talking any business. There's a whole bunch of stuff that should mostly be ignored. And then it says there's a whole bunch of stuff that just should be cut out. So 80-20 says that, so let's say you own a bunch of houses or apartment, a whole bunch of rentals. 80% of your maintenance and your calls at midnight and the plumber and the leaky roof come from 20%, and 50% come from 1%. 50% of your headaches come from 1% of your renters. And guess what? Those renters have certain characteristics, which you may notice if you observe very carefully. Like, I don't know if anybody's seen those like pictures of people at Walmart website, right? Like, so you start to figure stuff out, and it goes across all dimensions and all bands. Okay, so we could only be talking about apartment buildings, or we could only be talking about renting houses, and there would be these 80-20 levers, these tiny hinges that swing huge doors, and most people are oblivious, and they're polishing turds.
So Perry, this is, I mean, a phenomenal point. Actually, this is funny. The first time I ever learned this was when somebody said, "Hey, I bet you only wear 20% of the clothes in your closet." And I was like, wow, that's
it's
actually
so
true.
Oh my gosh.
It's true.
I wear the same
when you
5
think of
shirts
that,
every single week.
think of your closet, right? You only wear 20% of it.
You can get rid of 2/3 of your clothes and it wouldn't make a bit of difference.
You overlook everything else, and you're like,
but you know, it's interesting you say that, and I've forgotten about the 80-20 rule when it comes to investors, for example. And we're just realized this about 6-12 months ago. You know, all investors are not created equal. When you say, hey, the investment minimum is $50,000, everyone's coming in with $50,000, even if someone could come with $1 million. Now what we're realizing, oh my gosh, we actually get 80% or raise from 20% of our investors if we engage them correctly, if we build relationships. So back to your point, Perry, how do you spend your time? You're just not, split 20 different ways. No, you're spending your time with maybe 3 or 4 individuals, and you're really, really going deep with that. That's very interesting.
Yeah, so I want to take what you just said. I want to take a little detour, and then it's going to amplify what you said 1,000 times. So in my book, 80-20 Sales and Marketing, I talk about the principle of the $2,700 espresso machine. And what it says is that if you run a coffee shop, if you own a Starbucks, if 1,000 people a week come and buy a $5 latte, it's basically a law of physics, like gravity. If 1,000 spent $5, one of them will spend $2,500 on a gleaming, shiny stainless steel espresso machine, because there's a disproportionate amount of itch. So the fact that they spent the $5 says that they have a coffee itch and they like coffee, okay? But 80-20 says that 1% of those people want to give you 50% of your money because they have an overwhelming coffee itch. They have, like, the money is burning a hole in their pocket. They like vibrating and shaking from the caffeine. And so the demand, the pent up demand is there, and they'll spend like 500 times more money to get that thing, and you will reliably sell one of those things every week. Well, this applies to investors too. Okay. So if you had 1,000 people who invested $50,000, you'll have one person that invests 500 times $50,000. Like whatever that is, 25 million or whatever. I can't do.
It's a good point, and that's very, very true. You just don't know it in the beginning, right?
Right. And so anytime you have a bunch of people who all did the same thing, 1% of those people want to do it 50x, and 20% of those people want to do it 5x, like they want to do it way more. Okay. And so this means, yes, if you had 10 people give you $50,000, one of them will give you 500. And it's almost a law of physics. Like if in fact, if they don't, you failed to do something correctly. It means like if either you didn't ask them, or there was something wrong with the pitch, or something wrong with the offer, or something. But it should work that way.